He is not sleeping well. That is the first thing. Not the first thing you would see if you could look at his life right now, because from the outside his life looks exactly like it always has. His routines are intact. The things he shows up for, he is still showing up for. He looks, to anyone watching, like a man who made a decision and moved on from it. He is not sleeping well. There is something that happens in the hours between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. for the divine masculine who has hurt someone he genuinely loved. Something that the daytime management strategies can't reach. During the day, there are things to attend to, things to keep him out of the interior, tasks and conversations and the general friction of living that provides enough surface to keep him from dropping below it. But somewhere around 2 in the morning, the management runs out, the distractions go dark, and he is alone with what he actually did. He thinks about you in those hours. Not romantically, not with longing exactly, though that is in there too. He thinks about the specific moments, the things he said that he knew were wrong when he was saying them, the way you looked when a particular thing landed, the moment he chose to pull back when staying would have cost him something he wasn't ready to pay. He runs through it. The retrograde brain always runs through the moments it cannot change, and for him right now, you are one of those moments. If you have felt something unusual coming from his direction this week, a kind of pressure or weight in the space between you, a quality that is different from the ordinary silence he has been maintaining, you are not imagining it. That weight is real. It is the weight of a man beginning to reckon with what he actually cost someone. If this is landing for you, leave a like and subscribe. Drop, I know what you carried in the comments right now. Not for him, for yourself. Because what you carried was real, and it deserves to be witnessed. The sky this week is doing something specific. Jupiter in Cancer has been moving backward since last autumn, drawing everything that planet touches inward. Jupiter rules expansion, abundance, the places where life grows beyond its current container. In Cancer, Jupiter has been expanding the emotional interior, the home of the heart, the deep underground water table of feeling. It has been pulling outward, facing things inward, turning the places where growth usually happens in the visible world into an internal pressure-building season. And tomorrow, March 10th, Jupiter stations direct. It stops its backward movement. It holds completely still for a moment, and then it begins to move forward again. That forward turn begins tonight, right now, in the stillness right before it happens. For the divine masculine in this journey, a man whose guilt has been circling inward for months with nowhere to go, Jupiter direct in Cancer is not a small event. It is the moment when what has been compressing inside him, all the feeling that had nowhere to move, begins to feel the pressure of outward movement. Not necessarily action yet, not necessarily contact, but a shift in the direction the interior is pushing. From inward and recursive to something that can no longer stay entirely contained. He feels it without knowing what it is. He has constructed something specific around what he did to you. Not a story exactly, more like a structure. A set of interior arrangements that allow him to be in his life without being constantly flattened by the recognition of what his choices cost. The structure is not cynical. It is not the architecture of a man who doesn't care. It is the architecture of a man who cares too much and doesn't have the capacity, yet to feel the full weight of that caring without dissolving. The structure involves several things that he has never said out loud to anyone. It involves the minimization of what he walked away from. He tells himself it wasn't what he thought it was, that the intensity of what he felt was a projection, something he created rather than something real, and that stepping back from it was a kind of correction, a recalibration. He uses the language of clarity when he thinks about the decision, even though the decision was made not from clarity, but from fear. He has translated the fear into something that sounds more rational, something he can live inside. The structure also involves the management of your image in his mind. He can't think about you too specifically, not the version of you that exists in actual detail. The specific laugh, the specific way you said a particular thing, the specific texture of being in your presence when you were really present. He has learned to keep your image at a certain distance, impressionistic rather than precise, because precision brings the feeling in at a size that his defenses cannot manage. He keeps you a little blurry, a little abstracted, flattened into the concept of you rather than the lived, specific reality of you. And the structure involves one thing he will never articulate, not even to himself in the 2 a.m. hours. The awareness that he knew when he walked away, that he was choosing the smaller thing, not the wrong thing in some cosmic sense, not necessarily, but the smaller thing, the safer thing, the thing that didn't require him to become more than he was at that moment. He knows this without words, in the part of him that operates below language. And he has built the entire structure around not having to look directly at it. Post-traumatic growth research, developed by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, describes a specific phenomenon that happens in human beings when they go through significant rupture. The rupture doesn't have to be something that happened to them. It can also be something they caused. Tedeschi and Calhoun found that guilt with nowhere to go, the kind of guilt that cannot be resolved through apology or repair because the other person has moved or is unreachable, or the damage has calcified into a permanent shape, that kind of guilt behaves like the other forms of traumatic disruption. It breaks something open, and in the breaking, if the person moves through it rather than around it, it creates the same paradoxical expansion that all genuine suffering creates. A capacity for understanding that simply was not available before the cost became visible. He is not there yet. He is in the breaking phase. But the breaking is real, and it is his. And it is happening on the inside of a silence that, from where you stand, looks like nothing. There is a specific neuroscience to guilt that most people have never been taught. When the brain processes an act that violated its own values, it does something distinct from ordinary regret. Ordinary regret is comparative. It is the calculation of a different outcome, the road not taken, the choice that might have led somewhere better. It lives in the prefrontal cortex, the reasoning part of the brain, the part that runs counterfactuals and estimates probability. It is uncomfortable but containable. You can argue with ordinary regret. You can rationalize it into something more manageable. Guilt is different. Guilt engages the same neural circuits as physical pain, not metaphorically, literally. The anterior cingulate cortex, the part of the brain that processes the social pain of exclusion, betrayal, and moral violation, activates in ways that are neurologically almost identical to the pathways that process physical injury. This is why you cannot simply think your way out of genuine guilt. It is not a cognitive experience looking for a better argument. It is a pain experience looking for resolution. And here is the part that matters for understanding where he is right now. The brain's guilt response has an evolutionary design. It is designed to motivate repair, to push the organism toward the behavior that will restore the social bond that was damaged. The discomfort is not the punishment. The discomfort is the signal that says, something was broken here, and the thing that was broken was also something that mattered. His guilt, the kind that visits at 2 a.m, the kind that keeps your image alive in him despite everything he has done to abstract it. That guilt is not evidence of his weakness. It is evidence that what was between you was real enough to leave a mark in his actual nervous system. You cannot feel guilty about something that didn't matter to you. The guilt is the unwilling testimony, the part of him that his defenses cannot fully silence, the part that knows, below the level of the rationalizations and the minimizations and the careful abstracted distance he has maintained, that he stood at something significant and chose to walk away from it. And that choice had a cost, not only yours, his. Mercury retrograde in Pisces is making this worse for him, in the specific way that Mercury retrograde makes things worse for a person who is trying not to think about something. Mercury retrograde does not allow the past to stay in the past. It surfaces it. It runs it back. It inserts old conversations into the present moment with a clarity and a vividness that feels almost hallucinatory. He is remembering things with a precision that his ordinary daytime management cannot buffer. The specific things, Not the impression of you, but the actual you in specific moments, saying specific things with a specific quality that has no analog in the rest of his life. Mercury retrograde in Pisces. The messenger moving backward, through the sign of the deep psyche, the unconscious, the place where the soul lives when the waking mind isn't watching. He cannot outrun his own interior right now, and the part of his interior that holds you is awake. You have known something was different this week, not from him, not from contact or communication or any external signal from his direction, from inside yourself. From the part of you that has always been more accurately calibrated to the truth of this connection than your thinking mind has been comfortable admitting. Something shifted in the quality of the space between you, not dramatically, more like a pressure that arrived without a source. A weight in the shared field that wasn't there before in quite this form. That is his guilt reaching across the distance. This is not a mystical claim. There's a concrete mechanism for it. In the neuroscience of close relationships, particularly relationships of the depth and intensity that characterize the twin flame dynamic, the nervous systems of the two people involved develop a sustained attunement to each other. Mirror neuron research shows that human beings who have shared deep emotional experience, particularly experience of the kind that reshapes the nervous system's baseline, carry a physiological memory of each other in the body, not just the emotional memory, the somatic imprint. The body holds the frequency of the other person in a way that is not accessible to ordinary conscious awareness, but that remains active and responsive in the peripheral nervous system. When something shifts in his interior field, when the guilt that has been compressed inward begins to face the forward pressure of Jupiter direct, your nervous system registers it, not as a thought, as a sensation. The kind of sensation you have been experiencing this week and probably haven't had language for. Some of you have felt it as a sudden heaviness that doesn't belong to your own emotional weather. You are having an ordinary week. Nothing in your immediate life explains the weight. But there it is, arriving in your chest or your solar plexus or somewhere lower in the gut as a quality of something unresolved pressing from somewhere outside yourself. Some of you have felt it as a return of thoughts about him that had genuinely quieted. You had been doing the work. You had been genuinely oriented towards your own life in a way that felt real, not performed. And then this week, without any external trigger, he was back in your thoughts with a specificity and a vividness that surprised you. Not because your grief resurfaced, because something in the field changed. That changes him. Titici and Calhoun, in their research on post-traumatic growth, identified something they called the seismic metaphor. The idea that genuine rupture doesn't just damage the surface, it reorganizes what's underneath. And what's underneath, once reorganized, sends new signals upward toward the surface that didn't exist before the quake. He is in the reorganization. The seismic activity in his interior is sending tremors in your direction. Your body receives them before your mind can categorize them. This is why the no contact or the distance or the silence between you does not actually create the emotional distance it appears to create from the outside. The nervous systems stay in communication in ways that bypass the ordinary channels. The field between you is not empty. It has never been empty. It has just been carrying different things at different points in the journey. Right now it is carrying his reckoning. Most people think of post-traumatic growth as something that happens to someone who suffered. The person who was hurt, who lost something, who had the rupture happen to them. And yes, it happens there. You know that intimately. You have been in the growth that comes from loving someone who hurt you, and it is real, and it has genuinely changed you. But Tedeschi and Calhoun's research did not limit the growth phenomenon to victims. They found it in the person who caused the rupture too. When the person who did harm moves through genuine guilt, not the managed, intellectualized version, not the guilt that gets discharged through self-pity or narrative revision, but the actual grinding contact with what their choices cost another human being. Something happens in them too. Not the same thing that happens in the person who was hurt. Something with a different shape that arrives through a different door. but growth, real growth, the kind that reorganizes the architecture of the self. What this looks like in the divine masculine who hurt the divine feminine and has been living in the silence ever since is specific. It does not look like anything dramatic. It does not look like a revelation. It looks like small moments, private moments, in which the stories he has been telling himself stop working. It looks like the moment he tries to explain to himself, again, why the way he handled it was understandable. And the explanation suddenly has a hollow quality it didn't have before. Like the words are the same, but something underneath them has shifted, some load-bearing structure of the rationalization, and the whole thing feels less stable than it did. It looks like the moment he is with someone else, a friend, a family member, a colleague he actually likes, and he notices the quality of the interaction in comparison with something he will not name directly. Something missing. Not just connection in the general sense, something specific. The particular quality of being fully known, of being seen from all angles, including the unflattering ones, of not having to perform a version of himself that's been edited for the audience. He had that with you. He knows it in the comparison, even if he won't say it. It looks like the moment he helps someone, does something genuinely generous for another person, something that costs him a little, and the feeling it produces leads him somewhere uncomfortable. Because the feeling of actually showing up for someone, of choosing the harder thing because it's the right thing, sits in the same register as the feeling he didn't choose when he had the opportunity with you. The generosity toward the stranger illuminates the withholding from you, not cruelly, but clearly. Jupiter direct in Cancer is the planet of growth and expansion, turning forward in the sign that rules the emotional home, the mother, the deepest belonging, the place inside a person where they know what matters versus what they have told themselves matters. Cancer is the sign of genuine tenderness, of the love that doesn't perform but simply is, of the roots that hold even when the visible tree looks ordinary from the outside. Jupiter has been in Cancer all year, building something in the emotional underground. For the divine masculine in this journey, that building has been happening in the chamber of his interior, that he doesn't usually let anyone near. The chamber that holds the truth about what he actually values, what actually constitutes home to him, what kind of love he is actually capable of when the fear doesn't drown the capacity. With Jupiter turning direct tomorrow, that chamber is beginning to face outward. He cannot control this. It is not a decision. The pressure of a planet turning direct is not something the ego chooses. The cosmos is not asking him permission to redirect the growth that has been happening in his interior all this time. It is just turning forward. And what has been building in the dark, in the inward moving season, is going to begin looking for a direction to move toward. There is a thing you have been carrying specifically around what he did, not the grief, not the love, not the residual longing, those you know about, those you have been working with. The thing I mean is smaller and more specific and possibly more damaging than any of those. It is the question of whether you caused it, whether something you did or didn't do, something about the way you loved him, the degree of it, the manner of it, the timing of it, something about how you showed up, is what made it go the way it went. Whether a more careful version of you, a more strategic version, a version who loved less visibly or held back more or needed less, whether that version would have produced a different outcome. That question is a thief. It has been stealing something from you that belongs to you, which is the knowledge that you did not create what happened. You did not love wrong. You did not feel too much. You did not show up in a way that caused a capable, whole, ready person to run. You showed up for someone who was not yet capable of receiving what you were offering. That is a different thing entirely, and the difference matters. The post-traumatic growth research makes a specific finding about this. When a person reorganizes their understanding of a painful experience, they typically move through a phase where the narrative shifts from one organized around self-blame to one organized around accurate causation. The self-blame phase serves a psychological function. It maintains the illusion of control. If you caused it, then you could have prevented it, and a different version of you might prevent it happening again. Self-blame is uncomfortable, but it is not as terrifying as the true alternative, which is that you did everything right and it still happened because the other person was not ready, and you cannot control another person's readiness. The true alternative is more honest. It is also more painful in the short term, but it does something the self-blame cannot do. It releases the weight, because the question of whether you caused it is the weight. And the answer is no, not the complicated no that makes room for what you might do differently. The simple no. You loved someone. You loved them truly, with the full force of what you are, with an accuracy about who they were underneath. The defended version that most people in his life probably never touched, and he could not receive it. That is his work to do. It was always his work to do, and he is doing it now, in the 2 a.m. hours, in the guilt that visits without invitation, and the reckoning that Jupiter direct in Cancer is beginning to push from the interior of him outward toward a form that can actually move. His guilt is not your burden, but the resolution of it is going to require his growth, and his growth is happening. Let's be specific about where everything is tonight, because the planetary picture is doing something particular, and you deserve to understand what you are actually inside of. Mercury is retrograde in Pisces. Mercury rules how the mind works, how thoughts move, how the past communicates with the present. Retrograde means backward motion, which in practical terms means that mental processing is running in reverse. Old material is being reviewed. Things that were filed are being opened. Things that were considered resolved are showing up in the inbox again. For him, this means the memories, the specific ones, the ones he worked to keep impressionistic and abstracted, are running in a precision he cannot control. For you, it means that the understanding you have been building about what happened may shift again before it settles. Not backward, deeper. Mercury retrograde in Pisces asks you to let the understanding be incomplete a little longer, to let it keep moving rather than fixing it in place. Mercury turns direct on March 20th, 11 days from now. What you understand about this situation on March 21st will be clearer and more settled than what you understand tonight. Trust the incompleteness. Mars is in Pisces. Mars is the planet of action, drive, the forward-moving impulse, the thing that pushes from the interior toward expression. In Pisces, Mars does not move in straight lines. It moves like water. It finds its way around obstacles rather than through them. It is emotional and instinctual rather than strategic. For the divine masculine, Mars in Pisces means that whatever impulse toward action is building in him right now is not going to look like a decision. It is going to look like a feeling he cannot contain, an impulse that arrives without a plan, the kind of movement that comes from the gut rather than the head. He may reach out from this place, not because he has worked through what he owes you, not because he has arrived at clarity, but because Mars in Pisces sometimes moves before the mind is ready. If this happens, and it may, receive it with accuracy rather than with either hope or dismissal. It is real and it is partial. Both things are true. Saturn is conjunct Neptune in early Aries. This is the background frequency of the entire current moment. Saturn is structure, boundaries, the architecture of reality, the thing that tests and demands and will not let you pass without doing the actual work. Neptune is dissolution, the mystical, the place where the ego's constructions melt into something larger than themselves. Together in Aries, which is the sign of the new self, the pioneering energy, the self that is just beginning to know what it is. These two planets together are doing something that has no comfortable equivalent in ordinary life. They are simultaneously building and dissolving, forming and reforming. The structures of the self, for both of you, for him especially, are being built and dissolved at the same time. What he believed was solid in himself is proving less solid than he thought. And what he dismissed as ephemeral in himself, the feeling, the attachment, the love he told himself he could manage, is proving more structural than he told himself. His identity is being reorganized by a conjunction that will not let him stay in the version of himself that made the choice that hurt you. This is not happening because you wished it. It is not happening because the universe is delivering justice. It is happening because growth has its own momentum, and the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries is the cosmic climate of genuine selfhood building, and genuine selfhood cannot be built on a foundation that denied its own truth. He is being asked to become more real. That process is underway. And Jupiter direct in Cancer, the planet of expansion turning forward in the sign of the heart, beginning its direct motion tomorrow, is the moment when that interior reorganization begins to feel the pressure of eventual outward expression. Here is what the divine feminine who carries the knowing about this connection is being asked to do right now, in this specific week, with this specific planetary configuration. Absolutely nothing she has not already been doing. This is the part that will feel counterintuitive, because the awareness of what is moving in him, the guilt, the reckoning, the interior reorganization creates a natural impulse to do something, to respond to the shift in the field by leaning toward it, by making yourself more available, by creating more clarity about where you are, so that when he begins to move forward, you are visibly, unmistakably present. The impulse makes sense, but it is not what this moment is asking. What this moment is asking is something more difficult and more specific. It is asking you to let his reckoning be his, entirely his, without your involvement, without your energy moving toward it, without your presence, even your silent or energetic presence, functioning as either pressure or comfort in the space where his work is happening. This is where the post-traumatic growth model provides something important. Titechi and Calhoun found that genuine growth, the kind that reorganizes the architecture of the self rather than just updating the surface, requires a specific condition. It requires the person going through it to be in contact with the rupture without being rescued from it, to feel the full cost of what they did or experienced without having that cost mitigated before it has completed its work. The discomfort, the guilt, the grinding awareness of what was chosen and what was not. That is the mechanism of the growth. The growth happens not despite the discomfort, but through it and because of it. If you lean toward him right now, you risk rescuing him from the very process that is building the version of him that could actually meet you. This is not a strategy. It is not a calculated move. It is the truth about what growth requires. His growth. Not as an abstract thing, but as the specific organic process happening in him right now, in the 2 a.m. hours, in the guilt that Mercury retrograde keeps running at full resolution rather than letting him keep it blurry. Let it do its work. You do not have to disappear to let it do its work. You do not have to become unreachable or hostile or disinterested. You simply continue doing what you have been doing, which is living your own life in your own genuine presence without organizing the geography of your interior around what he is or is not doing. The irony that the twin flame journey teaches eventually, through significant pain and without apology for the teaching method, is that the love that tries the least hard to be received is the love most capable of being received. Not because withholding creates attraction, because wholeness creates a magnetic field that reaching never can. The love organized around itself, around its own genuine depth and clarity and fullness without performing toward another person is the love that can actually be met. Because it does not require the other person to complete it. It is already complete. And completion, genuine completion, creates a different kind of pull than longing does. You are closer to that place than you think. What the sky is asking of you this week is deceptively simple. Continue. Not in the direction of him. In the direction of yourself. Your own life. Your own becoming. The post-traumatic growth that has been happening in you through the experience of loving someone who hurt you. That growth is not finished, but it has moved far enough that what you are now is genuinely different from what you were when this began. That difference is not nothing, it is actually everything. It is the thing that cannot be performed or faked or gotten to through strategy. It is the thing that arrives through genuine contact with your own pain and your own strength and your own capacity to keep becoming even when the external circumstances offer you very little to work with. You have been becoming. And Jupiter direct in Cancer, turning forward tomorrow in the sign of emotional home and genuine belonging, is beginning to push that becoming towards something it can actually meet. The guilt he carries is his work. Your becoming is yours. And the two things are moving separately toward the same point. That point is not yet visible, but the convergence is real. And the sky tonight is not subtle about its direction. You did not cause what happened. You could not have prevented it. You loved someone with everything that you are, and that love was not the problem. It was never the problem. It was, and it remains, the most accurate thing either of you has ever touched. He is beginning to know that, not in words, not in a way that will produce visible action tonight, or maybe for some time, in the 2 a.m. way, in the way that arrives before language, in the way the body knows something the mind is still catching up to. The guilt he carries in silence is his, but the love underneath the guilt is yours. And love of that quality does not require his full arrival to be real. It already is,